Well, welcome to another Key Yachting webinar, and today we're joined by Stuart Childerley and Hannah Prevost. This is a series we're doing on the Key Yachting Facebook page, but you can always watch a replay either at keyyachting.com or you can go to our YouTube channel and watch it there. And today I'm delighted to welcome back Hannah. Hannah, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Louis. How are you?
Yeah, I'm enjoying the sunshine. Got out on the bike today, which was nice, and had a long distance chat with a couple of people down in the boatyard. I think I saw you down there on
You
an
did.
Autotech, didn't I?
I was actually down there doing a little viewing at a socially safe distance
Yeah,
with some clients who are planning their next big trip.
yeah, wonderful, wonderful. And no, it's good to get out, and we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. And today we're mixing it up a little bit. We're going to be talking about one particular fantastic adventure, and then also we're going to be talking about perhaps the new normal, where things are going to be going once we get out of this lockdown. And I'm delighted to say we've got Stuart Childerley with us today, international race officer, and an extraordinary sailing career as well in all sorts of boats. And we've pulled one on you here, Stuart. Nice to see you to start with. Welcome to the show.
Nice to see you too. Thank you.
Now, come on, Stuart. Tell us about this picture here.
Well, this picture was taken in the 1989 Fastnet. I think we'd just gone around the Lizard, sailing a boat indulgence, a one-tonner, and it was my first year in the Bob Wiley School of Seamanship, doing my time as the nipper. And in the picture, left to right, you've got David Howlett, myself, Derek Clark, Peter Morton with some hair, and Bob Wiley,
Right.
young Kelvin, who we did the double-handed with in the Fastnet, Tim Haynes, I think your Kendall Law, A-list City Lunch, and Eddie Owen was taking the picture. So we had a fantastic team, a boat full of experience. It was a fantastic year that year.
And I think Eddie skipped Indulgence, didn't he, in that campaign?
He did, and he'd sailed a couple of campaigns with Graham Walker, the owner of Indulgence, 87 Fastnet and Admiral's Cup, and then 89 is when the British team won with Juno and Jamarella back in the day.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's where you used to go. Once you finish the dinghy sailing, you work then through the keelboat scene to get into the proving ground of offshore racing. And I was very, very lucky because I went straight from the Finn after the 88 games, sailed the next year with this team on the one-tonner. We did the one-ton cup down in the Mediterranean in Naples. And I was working on the boat, doing the deliveries, working alongside Bob, just learning everything I could about big boats.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thanks very much, Stuart. We've got a more recent picture of you here, and you and Kelvin, you haven't aged a day.
No.
So
I'm just laughing at that one because the protest flag hanging on the back rail.
Nice.
One of our golden rules for the Fastnet was to not lose the race right at the outset, and I think this incident happened within about 50 meters of the start line, having started the race. So as it happened, it all evaporated. The red mist died away, and we carried on racing.
Yeah. I was going to bring that up. I was wondering whether that was your protest flag hanging out at the back there, Stuart. And I thought, as an international race officer, that's pretty. You got some minerals to do that at the start of the Fastnet, but it all came out in the wash, did it?
Yeah, it did, and it's interesting. Since then, there's a way. Apparently, there's a way of conspicuously displaying your protest flag, and there is a view sometimes with some protest committees that displaying the flag horizontally doesn't on the back on your guardrail there doesn't construed with flying it vertically on a backstay. But
okay, all right, there you go.
There you go.
We
I'm sure a few of the top protest committee members and judges and
We better
would
move
have
ours
something
on
to
the
say.
70 then.
Yes.
Well, look, Hannah, I know that the J105 Jester, which Stuart and Kelvin had an amazing success in that 2015 Fastnet. That Key Yachting played a part in getting the boat for them. Is that right?
Yeah, so we acted as the broker for Kelvin and Stuart, and actually it was one of those, slightly odd ones that they'd never seen the boat when they agreed to buy it.
Oh wow!
It was over, and they were picked up from Denmark, and it was, it was just, I think it was all just meant to be and fell into place, and sometimes that's the way with a brokerage boat.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go on, Stuart.
Well, it's an amazing story, really, because Kelvin bought the boat, as Hannah said, unseen, and the boat was delivered to the end of the Kiel Canal, just on the Elbe.
Yeah.
And Kelvin, I, and I'm just trying to think, someone else drove the car with us, and we drove. We left England at 4:00 in the afternoon because I'd sort of delayed departure for some reason. I can't quite think what, but we drove through the night. We arrived in at the boat at about 5:30 that morning, and it was just a classic example of and this is the whole theme really, is we had our fingers burnt so badly, is we arrived, we took some sails off the boat, having never seen the boat, left some sails that we thought were good, threw the food on the boat, and Kelvin and I then departed, and the car went back to England, and that was it. And we thought we were on a good weather forecast. Anyway, we got out through the lock at the end of the canal. There was a big sign saying free, and with some arrows, and we thought, what's that all about? And apparently it's the speed of the current and which direction it's going. And we got out, and we got halfway out and up towards the port right at the end of the Elbe, and all of a sudden the tide turned, so we had 3 knots coming against us. Not a lot of wind, and from there everything conspired against us. And we'd been driving through the night, no rest, and we were going into this, and we'd stopped. I think it's Brunsbüttel at the top of the Elbe, and we stopped there to have a cup of tea. And because it's a boat we didn't really know, we couldn't find the gas tap, and we spent hours looking around trying to have a cup of tea. And in the end, if I remember it, if you look, reaching inside one of the lockers, right up in the top corner, is a little extra tap for the gas. And eventually we found it, had a cup of tea, and then off we went.
Right.
Into a northeast gale.
Yeah.
In the out of the eye, and it just went wrong for us all the time, and it taught us not to be complacent and prepare and be ready for everything, because that was right at the outset. And we ended up putting the boat on a truck in Holland 2 weeks later, and trucking the boat back to the UK in June.
Okay. So Stuart,
not the perfect start.
Not the perfect start.
Why did you go for the J105?
We looked at a number of boats. At the time, JPKs were an option. There was 1 or 2 J105s, but we were looking for something that was a good boat to sail short-handed. So clearly, there's a balance of getting the boat that's not big enough, that will not compete that well against the bigger boats in tidal racing, and at the same time, if the boat's too big, it's too much of a handful for double-handed sailing. Also, the J105 is a very well-known design and sails remarkably well short-handed. It's reasonably good on its stability. It's just a good all-round boat, and people know the boats. They're solid. They've done a lot of miles over the time, and they're great boats to go out and do the sort of stunts that we were trying to do that year.
Yeah, just to explain to people who might not be totally aware, Kelvin Rawlings 22 Fastnets on boats like Leopard and what have you. You yourself seven Fastnets again on big high profile high performance boats, and
Yep.
neither of you had attempted to do the Fastnet race two-handed before.
No, this all started off the December before the Fastnet, when we just wanted a challenge. And I think I texted Kelvin and said, look, double-handed Fastnet, what do you think? And his answer immediately came back, yes. And from there on, we just didn't look back, and we just got stuck in. And Paul Hayes was fantastic, and with his knowledge of the industry and where the second-hand boats were, that really helped us get a boat, secure a boat reasonably quickly, and enable us to then start the rest of the planning in preparation for our first race, which ended up being the Somalo race mid-June.
Right. Just to tell people watching here, if you want to ask a question, please feel free to do so. You can just put one in the comments box. We aren't past the 9 p.m. watershed though, people, so keep it family friendly. But I know Hannah has got a question to ask Stuart.
So you were talking about all your preparations, Stuart, when you got the boat and brought it over, and what was the key things that you considered from getting the boat ready to sail double-handed, safety equipment, all of those things? Did you have priorities that you needed to tick?
We did, and first and foremost, the challenge of sailing double-handed for us was we were having to relearn sailing, and in a totally different concept. So going through the safety gear, I always, at the end of the race, I remember, if we ever do it again, our sailing gear ourselves, the gear was so heavy, and you know, by the time you got life jackets, harnesses, and waterproofs and everything on, you know, it's quite a burden wearing all that gear. So I just wanted to think very carefully about what equipment we have, weight of the boat, making sure that we finish the race regardless, thinking also how the two of us manoeuvre and change sails, keeping it all safe. So making sure that we got all the right tether lengths and things, and talking extensively about how we go about making changes with sail changes and taking spinnakers down, and making sure that the systems are in place for that. So once we had the boat, we just went through everything that we could within the time. So putting some a different altimeter on the boat and an electrical system to keep the batteries charged well was quite important, because we didn't want lots of engine hours disrupting our rest pattern. And you know, again, being very conscious about weight. There was one instance in the Fastnet race when the two of us, we sailed straight by I think it was a fully crewed J109, and that really emphasised how important weight is in the boat, because we were just two people with absolutely minimum stuff on the boat, flying along in marginal planing conditions, whereas the other boat was just a bit sticky.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's good to know.
Yeah, really on point here, on subject. Joseph Ponsfana has just asked what modifications were done to Jester, the J105 for the 2015 Rolex Fastnet race. I think you went through quite a few there, Stuart.
Yeah.
But there weren't any major mods, were there?
There was no modifications to the keel or the stability of the boat. It was all pretty well as it came. What we did do is we put some strengtheners on the spreaders. We went through all the running rigging. We looked at our reefing systems very carefully to make sure that we were in a position to reef quickly and efficiently. Down below, just making sure there's some good little tidy holes to keep things dry and well stored. And our biggest consideration was the sail inventory. So for normal inshore racing, 3 jips, for us, we were very we looked at it very freshly, and we came up with a 2-jib option. So we had a J1, as you call it, which took us pretty well from drifting right through to 14 knots if it had to. And our J2 overlapped from about 10, 11 knots and took us right through to 17 knots. And then the J2, we had a nice reefing system, so where we could just drop the sail down approximately, a meter, just under a meter, and set the jib there, and effective as a really nice small J3.
You just had a hanked on. Was it a hanked on jib, Stuart?
Yes, it was. Yeah, just hanked on, and I think some boats at the time were still on roller furling. Some boats had foils, but we wanted to just keep it simple. It was really important that we had the versatility of just dropping a reef in, drop a sail in, into a reef on the jib or the main, rather than have to change the sail, because we knew that would just eat into our energy and break our rest routine. And the whole rest, going 3 hours on, 3 hours off, was so important to just keep that going, except for when we had a really key point.
Yeah.
Okay, this is slightly off point, but Fumesy will give me some grief if I don't put this up. So
Fumesy.
Simon Russell, I should say. Simon Russell, I believe that's Simon Russell. What event is still on your wish list? Dual-handed, all fully crewed. Stuart, that's a...
I think that the next Fastnet race is going to be really interesting. I just think it's a new course. To do that race, maybe double-handed, I think would be fantastic to be able to have said we did the first race of the new course. And I think the complexity potentially of the finish and sailing around Cap de Hague and going past Alderney and missing all the traffic should be a really big challenge. Okay. And I think there's Kelvin and I we really enjoyed the last double-handed Fastnet, and to go and do that again would be pretty special.
Okay, there you go, Fumesy. Don't give me any grief. I've got your answer from Stuart there. Well, I think we'll move on to the next slide, which is basically just a lead into a video. So what we've got very kindly by the Royal Ocean Racing Club, they've let us have the tracker footage, if you like, from your start. It's only about 2 minutes long. And there's no commentary, Stuart, so you're going to do the commentary, okay. And everyone else is going to make a cup of tea, including me. No, we're not. But it would be really interesting to get your take on basically the start of the 2015 Fastnet race. So here you go,
sure.
Stuart.
What I do remember, it was absolutely flat calm right up to about the class warning signal for our class. So there's quite a bit of motoring, and the motoring involved staying in the vicinity of where we wanted to start, because effectively once the prep signal had been displayed, that was us. We were committed. We wanted to be in the strongest part of the tide, which was in the southern half of that start line.
Yeah. Should explain. I put the top 5 boats two-handed on the tracker as well. It's only the top 5.
Yeah. Now, the other thing, we had this absolute golden rule that we weren't to put ourselves in a position to lose the race. So all through the whole of the race, we had to just focus on keeping doing things, staying in touch with competitors, knowing where competitors were, not getting ourselves out on a limb against other boats. And the thing that we did find is the AIS now brings a totally different dimension when you're racing offshore, because you can track your competitors reasonably carefully and just know where everyone is. And so, but it was a really light start, and we literally drifted out of the Solent. And it took up a lot of concentration, and going into that first night as well, there was a lot of opportunities to really get behind the competitors and lose good ground on that first night, which we're very, very conscious about.
Yeah. And I was at that start, not racing, but I was at the start, as you say, very light. There was quite a bit of tide with you, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you chose Island Shore. Was that for any particular reason? Oh, yeah, at the start you chose.
It's just in that, where the red line's drawn on the screen there from the start to Hurst. Generally staying south of that red line, there's a bit more tide.
Okay.
As you go to the west, it evens out a bit. But certainly in the first bit, you just need that sort of bit just well south, close to the shore. And generally, in those really light conditions, you get a little bit more pressure on the shore, closer to the shore first as well.
Okay. Very light start. I mean, I should explain. We only showing 5 boats on the chart there. There were 370 boats or something. That must be amazing to be in that. Is the adrenaline running even when it's light like that?
It is. It's frustrating in a way, because all we wanted to do is get going, and we were literally going across the ground at 2 knots at quite a lot of that first leg up to Hurst, until we got towards Yarmouth, where the southwesterly began to fill in with a bit more strength.
I think I remember people being washed over by the tide, washed over the start line and having to go back.
They were.
Yeah.
And I think one of our competitors, I think it's Night and Day, one of the French boat, the JPK 1010, that got washed over, and they went back, and they sailed a remarkable race to get back into contention.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was Joey Trentaso, actually.
Okay.
Who went on to win the race overall, fully crewed. But you had a great battle with Night and Day. I'm going to chuck this one in there, Stuart. I'm going to pay for this. I know I'm going to pay for this.
You promised no one to.
Andrew McIrvine, former Admiral and Commodore of the Royal Nation Racing Club. You said never again, apparently.
Yes. Yeah, well, we get older and wiser, apparently. No, it's, again, being in this situation now with everyone's sailing programs completely evaporated and having to rebuild, you've got to have a think about what you want to do. And I very much enjoy the race officering. It's great to go sailing as well. And, if we can make the opportunity and go and get stuck in and make it again, why not?
Right. Thank you. Shall we go to the next slide? Because this sounds awful, but I've sort of missed out the bit all the way down to Land's End. We've got from Land's End round to the Rock, and there were some interesting battles going on there. I think I'll just play the video just to get it going. And so here we go. This is that's the one.
Yeah. What was really interesting with this part of the race is that, again, all the way up the channel to Land's End, we'd focused on the other boats and staying in touch. Mm-hmm. And relatively, this was only our second race and plus and qualifying. So we were still trying to get a relative performance against the other boats. And we all arrived at the traffic separation zone and knew that we had a long port tack pretty well. I think this time the wind was pretty west, and gradually building. So over the next 24 hours, as we headed towards the Rock, we were expecting up to 20, 25 knots for a short period. So there was a point, we're around the point, we need to get some rest, we need to keep pushing, we need to anticipate an increase in pressure. So part of the philosophy we had with certainly the way we sailed was always to change gears quickly. So we were on a light headsail. So it was quite a key key decision of when to go to the J2, and then also when to go to the J2 with the reef in it, and when to put a reef in the main. And we ended up, I think, approximately 12 hours out from Land's End. We were sailing alongside 2 or 3 of our competitors, and decided, right, when do we change? And also making those changes in good time to again give your partner, or whoever's on watch at the time, a chance to get some rest.
Right.
And then we got a good way apart across the sea, the Irish Sea. We had the 20 knots or so, maybe a bit more, for about 5-6 hours. And the approach to the rock was pretty well hard on the wind. And it was, just keep going. And we, again, not losing the race, knowing that every second counts, all those good rules of push was so important.
And here the tracker shows the top 5, the boats that finished top 5, all at the rock at the same time. And
Yes.
One of the attractions of the Rolex Fastnet race is that rock. It's an iconic lighthouse, isn't it? What time of day did you go round, Stuart?
We were lucky to go around in about 10 o'clock in the morning, I think it was. Certainly daylight, which I hadn't done many daylight roundings. So it was great to see the rock. But to be honest, you have a good look at it. But our focus had gone from, great, we've made it upwind, we're still in touch. We knew some of the opposition will have had a bit of an advantage sailing upwind against us because they had auto helms, and our auto helm was great we could make a sail change and it would be responsive enough for making that change while we're both hands on. But it wasn't tuned in enough, and we didn't have enough time really before the race to have it that it could sail well or equal to a person helming.
So you hand steered.
You
did a lot of hand steering,
yeah.
rather, not in the manoeuvres.
All the way.
Wow.
All the way. So apart from the manoeuvres, when we did a quick change, we would put our hands and thrust into the auto helm.
Wow.
And it was retrospectively that was a really big thing, making sure that if we were to do it again, making sure that we had more time to refine the system.
Right.
And so we went around the rock, and our focus then went, and we had a short fetch, and then we had a spinnaker hoist, and it was a matter of just doing everything early and really steadily to make sure there were no mistakes. And we got to that point, we hoisted, got going, and but it took quite a lot of effort to hoist. I think 3 or 4 attempts to clip on the tack and pull it out. So we had a little dolphin breaker on the tack line, which was something that we put on, that if we got into difficulties, we could just ease the tack line and the dolphin breaker would trip the Sparcraft clip on the tack.
And take the wind out of the spinnaker.
Yeah, and that would just go away. But the problem is when you're pulling the pole out and feeding the tack and feeding the spinnaker, and you've been sailing hard for 12 hours, to get that all right in terms of coordinating between us, and I think it took us 3 or 4 attempts to get the tack out and get it all hoisted.
Yeah.
Not...
And you're at the Rock. I know they put out the proper rankings. The real IRC TCC rankings. Did you know what the situation was in the two-handed class at the Rock?
Absolutely no idea.
Right.
And but we knew we had to push. We knew we had good competitors around us, and I think we went off on a nice spinnaker reach away from the Rock. It was a good chance to get some rest and prepare for that next sort of phase of the race, which was getting around the Bishop Rock, and getting back into the channel.
So I'm gonna hold it there. Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
That is Hey Joe going north of the TSS there. Did
Yeah.
you know? Were you watching him?
No, I think they were just away from us because with the AIS we had about 10, 11 miles range.
Okay.
So so some boats we're aware of some boats who were watching, but we didn't know where they were, and they were clearly out of range. And there were some boats that we were watching pretty carefully,
Yeah.
just right around us all the time.
I'm pretty sure that's night. You're the larger boat in this pack, but I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
that's Night and Day, who were
Yes.
in front of you, and you were to weather of them, but
Yeah.
they were in front of you.
And if I remember rightly, when we got to the Bishop Rock, Bishop Light, it all went a bit funny and light, and then it filled in again, and we got a nice little passage towards the Lizard. So things were reasonably straightforward, and then it went very light, and we only just got around the Lizard, and we were absolutely, again, it was a really key point in the race for us to be really switched on, both people on deck, working hard in the light conditions to get around the Lizard, because we were right on the edge of a tidal turn.
Yeah.
And then soon after the Lizard, the breeze filled in, and so pretty well from the rock around the Bishop and to the finish line, I think we just managed to get a little bit of sleep whilst we sailed away from the rock, and then it was full on, just charge, and that was just great fun. And then it was constantly the question of, right, how are we doing? It started off every 45 minutes, and Kelvin would have a look at the instruments, and bless him, he'd get a bit frustrated because he needed his reading glasses on to look at the instrument and find out where we were on the AIS. So, and you can imagine that for every 45 minutes having that question asked was bearable.
Right.
But once we got the charge on, it was every 15 minutes. Right, how are we doing? And we're just pushing hard and hard.
Yeah.
And the breeze had got up to 18, 20 knots coming after the Lizard. And we had this horrible dilemma that we had this spinnaker up. We knew the boats around us, we were doing well, and we had to push hard, and that was just the general philosophy of both of us. Mm-hmm. But we also knew that we would look pretty stupid if we had the head of the spinnaker at the top of the rig and the rest of the spinnaker in the boat. So we had this dilemma of, do we go for a change, and when do we change? And as the breeze kept getting up, and again it's just working out, okay, let's change, let's be safe. And as Murphy's Law would say, we changed spinnakers when we went to the 0.9 from a 0.5. And about an hour after that change, the wind shifted and went much lighter.
Right.
And so we ended up having to change back. So we ended up, in that last change, having to do 3 spinnaker changes, a couple of jibes, all under the pressure that we've got to keep going. We mustn't lose the race, but we've got to push.
Yeah.
And the adrenaline was great. And I've not experienced that in a fully crewed race, and I can see the attraction of double-handed sailing when you've got absolute trust in the person you're sailing with, and if you're sleeping, they're pushing the boat equally as hard, and if you're pushing the boat, they're resting, and they've got that mutual respect.
Yeah.
And also, when you are sailing the boat, it's defining the roles and responsibilities between you. So my focus was really backup navigation and dealing with things whilst I was on watch, but driving the boat hard. And Kelvin was quite happy he'd sail the boat very well and hard, but he was the one that would be happy to prepare the food, do the admin stuff around inside the boat in terms of battery management, keeping it dry and all those sort of things. He was very happy to do that. And it was just, we sensed, and we sailed together for a huge amount, so we knew what each other were best at, but at the same time had that respect of trusting when you did change division and change responsibility. We could both do an equally good job doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
Stuart, something you mentioned there was the asymmetric spinnaker and making those changes. How easy did you find that as a double-handed team?
Well, I think at the time we didn't have snuffers or anything, so we decided that we were with the asymmetrics a little bit easier, so we could. I think we were easing the tack line and effectively blowing it using the marlin breaker, and then taking the sail in. Either if it was lighter, we'd take it in onto the foredeck and then clip the other one up and do a simultaneous hoist straight after the drop. Or if it's windier, we just bring it straight into the cockpit hatch. And the J105 was good for that. The deck layout was good and there was plenty of room and lots of things to hold on to. But at the same time, one of the things that we had to get used to was the safety element of, there's two of you on the boat. If one person falls off the boat, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to get them back very quickly.
Yeah.
And that was quite a big consideration that we spoke about a lot. That if you imagine the scene, you're sailing double-handed in a spinnaker drop or something. All of a sudden, one person goes over. Well, they're either dangling there on the tether, or the tether's broken, or whatever. And there's a lot to deal with, and that was we were very mindful about that whenever we did manoeuvres. So the manoeuvres we talked about a lot, and practice to make sure that we were reasonably regimented in the process. So there was never a rush, but it was efficient.
Right.
And I think now a lot of the boats of that sort of size, the 10-metre size, 30, 35 feet, are beginning to use spinnaker snuffers. And that's something that, on hindsight and looking at what they're doing now, it seems to be a very good idea. It's just a lot more efficient and safer in terms of risk of losing equipment or someone over the side.
Yeah, good point.
Well, we pulled up a screen again. Thanks very much to the Rourke. These are the actual results. So when you finished, did you know how close it was?
No, I think we finished. We'd known we were just absolutely exhausted, to be frank about it, and we got into Plymouth Sound, dropped the sails, and just did. I think I had a couple of rope coils left in me, and I tidied up the sheets, and we sat there, and there was a couple of boats around, and I then picked up the phone and rang ashore, and my daughter answered the phone, and Lisa's phone, my wife. So Abby picked the phone up, and she said, "You've done all right, haven't you?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, it looks like you might be first or second." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, I'm not going to tell you." So that buoyed us up a bit and gave us another little explosion of energy from somewhere. And by the time we got to the marina, we got a sense that we'd done okay. And we got there, and it was absolutely, for us, it was so different. I can speak a little bit for Kelvin, but we went into the whole campaign just treating it as we don't know much about double-handed sailing and learning about it, and just taking our experience from fully crewed offshore racing and all of the racing background that we got, and just it was very invigorating relearning the sport, and that was a really good thing to do, and to actually do it. And we afterwards we had some The hindsight cards, if our auto helm had worked much better, I think we'd have a couple of things with the sail designs, and the other thing was weather routing. Our navigation package was very basic, so right at the outset we took as much weather information in as we could, but we were blind during the course of the race in terms of taking stuff onto the boat and recomputing. Yeah. So we were looking up at the stars and the clouds, working out what was going to go next, which, down to basic stuff. But it was the thing that really came out was just the drive and determination that you've got to have at the right time to make this work.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a little bit small on the screen. I'm not going to try and zoom in when I've got you over the top because it will go wrong. But I'll just cut to the quick. So, Jester, Childerley and Rawlings, a 20-year-old J105, okay, with the pair of them never having done the Fastnet two-handed before, won by 14 seconds, 14 seconds on corrected time, from Night and Day, which won the race overall two-handed in 2013. Yeah. I think I'd have probably had more than one drink if that would have been me, Stuart.
We did, and you can see us at the fancy dress party there holding our glasses.
But it's amazing. No. It's an amazing achievement.
It was. And I think it was hugely satisfying. And I think the whole thing with the Olympics at the moment, there's a lot of enthusiasm and attention going into double-handed sailing. And I can understand why, because it's so different.
A 10-year-old, Louis, 105 would have been 10 years old.
Sorry, that's
not quite 20. Not quite 20. Sorry, I thought just dropped that one in there.
Are you a glass of wine, Hannah? 10-year-old Jester, beg your pardon.
10-year-old boat, yeah. But I can see why there's so much interest in double-handed sailing, and it is, it's great to go offshore racing with a full team, and they relatively those, the fully crewed offshore racing, they push the boats equally as hard. But when there's a bond between two people, and it seemed, certainly, maybe I was out of practice, but certainly at the end of that race, I was absolutely shattered. And but it was hugely exhilarating to have gone through it and come out on top. And yes, I can see certainly over the next few years a lot of interest. And as what would be quite interesting is see how those that are reasonably new into offshore racing, how they but are good at sailing boats, how they gain the offshore experience. That I think a lot of offshore experience is still required.
Well, we've got yourself here that's won the Fastnet two-handed. We've got Hannah, who is an expert with particularly the J boats at Key Yachting. Let's just go. There's a lovely picture of the pair of you. You look proud as punch there, the pair of you.
Yeah,
absolutely fantastic. But I'm going to just go through to this screen, because here we have some examples of J boats that have done amazingly well two-handed, and I've spoken to Stu Johnson, I've spoken to Hannah, spoken to a few others. It's in the DNA of a J boat. Hannah, could you explain why a J boat's so good short-handed?
Well, J boats have always been designed with the basic concept of them being family boats. So when you've got a family on board of mixed ages, mixed abilities, you've got to make them user friendly. You've got to be inclusive, that everybody can get involved. You can't take the family out and just ask them to sit on the rail all day. That doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So the boats have got to be easy to move around. They've got to be safe. And these are all kind of key factors that you relate back to being good for double-handed. The asymmetric spinnaker, as Stuart was saying, putting a snuffer on that makes it a really easy sail to use. And there's always been, different ways of dropping it, whether you drop it through the cockpit or drop it through the forehatch. depending on the conditions. But it all comes back to how the boats are built stable. The keels are very stable with big bulbs on the bottom, but they're not penalised too heavy on the IRC factor.
Yeah.
So for competitive racing and taking it double-handed, you're gonna reap the benefits on lots of different fronts, and being able to use these boats on different spectrums, which is really important. And I think that's more important now than we'll ever know or could have ever imagined.
Yeah. And Stuart Childerley, you must have, in your research in going for the J105, saw what Spud Murphy had done with Slingshot, saw what Nick Jones had done with Diablo J. Both boats had been Rourke Yacht of the Year, both racing two-handed. And with that, as Hannah's saying, with that asymmetric setup, it allows short-handed sailing. The boat is designed to be sailed short-handed and easily raced two-handed. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the boat sails well in its own right. So it's not reliant on a full crew to get the performance out of it. You can shorten down the crew, you can sail it in this double-handed configuration, and the boat still sails well. It's not on its ear. It's not going to roll backwards and forwards trying to get it downwind. It's comfortable, and if you've got a boat that sails well, that's half the battle, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Right, well, we're going to show you, this is the cockpit of the J99, the latest design from J-Boats and designed for two-handed. It's shortlisted for the two-handed Olympic class. And I'm not being fair to Stuart because I don't think he's ever sailed one, but compared to a J105, what are the improvements in the cockpit layout, Stuart, that you can see?
It's a tiller instead of a wheel, which I would have thought is better. The cockpit's more open. The layout of the boat, I think, as we've done more and more double-handed sailing over the years, the focus of the layout of the boat and bringing the controls to more of a central point and is very important. And this boat also has a fixed bowsprit as well. So when you're hoisting the spinnakers or the code zeros, there's no need to try and do that juggling act of pulling out the bowsprit and everything else at the same time.
Yeah, that's
so it looks very, very clean, tidy, simple, giving everyone a good chance to be able to handle the boat and do all the manoeuvres really well, which a lot of the new boats that are aimed at the double-handed are going that way. There's a lot of thought going into the deck layouts.
And as you pertain to there, and I'll bring Hannah in on this one. Here we can see this is the fixed bowsprit upwind as well, and the performance of the hull. The J105 is how many years old, Hannah? 10, 12 years old?
Well, yeah. 10 plus years. The one that Stuart was on was 10 years old in 2015.
Right.
I think what the important thing and relates back to the J-Boats DNA again is that the concept has moved forward in fractions. So things like the 99 being the first ever with a fixed bowsprit, not the traditional retractable that people have seen before, is a development of this double-handed. I don't know what the right word is.
Trend.
Good word. Couldn't think of a word there. So I think that's important, and one of the things that Stuart really highlighted, and I think we can all remember sometimes on boats, is keeping it simple is the best practice. You could have, by having a sail wardrobe that does bigger spectrums, means that you're doing less changes, and that means it's more of a flexible boat to use, which the 99 actually comes with hanked-on jibs, again ideal for double-handed, and reduces the amount of time that you're going to be spending switching and changing. So yeah, I think it's the full package really is what we try and aim for. Boats that can go upwind, downwind, but are actually really user friendly, which, you don't need a boat to be harder to sail than it is already. The elements will do that for you.
And Stuart, with your racing hat on and your race officer hat on, upwind performance is very important, isn't it, in a racing scenario?
Oh, it is, and certainly the Fastnet race. I think that there was some data recently put out on another web channel suggesting that the Fastnet race is quite windward lured orientated, and relatively quite a short or small percentage of reaching. So, having a boat that sails well upwind and can get downwind from a VMG perspective is very important.
The next slide is a shot two-handed downwind, and I think what you get with the performance is also you get a thrill. I mean, it's thrilling to race one of the. I know you've raced Hannah the J99. What sort of speeds are you talking about downwind in good conditions?
Oh, good conditions. You're easy mid high teens. With a bit more consistency, I reckon you're going to be touching the 20s for sure. And it's in those conditions that you want to know. I think that's something that the 105 always really had going for it as a model. I spent a long time sailing on a Journeymaker, the 105 fully crewed here in the Solent, and you could have it in 25 knots of breeze and that boat would just keep trucking downwind. I mean, it was so stable and such a joy to be on. I think that's exactly the kind of thrill we're trying to get to with the 99, without going too extreme, because otherwise these boats don't rate and they don't race anywhere near as much in these fleets like the double-handed, because they've got to be stable. That's really important.
I think that's right. We saw in the Fastnet race the difference between just two people and a tiny amount of equipment on the boat against fully crewed, and how the boats just light up in relative performance.
It's really important factor, and that is key to how we do it.
Yeah, I lost you a little bit there. Are you back, Stuart? You back in the room?
The challenge of
Is he there? Oh, he's there.
I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. All good. All good, Stuart.
Yeah. So I was just saying that the from that picture, the challenge of taking the sails down and putting sails up, or tacking and jibing, that's the attraction to double-handed sailing, as well as the relative performance of the boats just jumping up, particularly downwind when there's just two of you on board with very little weight in crew equipment.
This slide here is sort of a series of pictures. First of all, I bet your J105 wasn't as nice as that downstairs, Stuart.
Not at all. No, I don't remember much about the interior, to be honest. It's somewhere where you just get your head down and that's it.
I'm sure you had dinners laid like that for every meal. I'm sure Kelvin was serving you everything on china plates and.
But I think it is important to point out that the J99 has a full interior. You're talking a chart table, galley, two berths, forward for storage, and it's well laid out downstairs as well, isn't it, Hannah?
It is, and I think that's starts moving the boat into the different side of it as well. Is that this is a family sailing boat. J boats always have been family sailing boats, and it's about getting people on the water. And actually, right now we're in that position where people can get on the water again with their families. And I think this is something that's going to become the new normal. Is that it's not going to be your usual crew of Jack, Jill, and John from all different places. It's going to be your brothers, your sisters, your husbands and wives. All sailing together, and that's what this boat's designed to do, as well as a double-handed Fastnet.
And Stuart, the picture below where you've got two J99s, one has the fixed bowsprit, the other one has the stub with a pole, with a symmetric setup.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to show here is that you can adapt the boat for racing. You can adapt your handicap rating, but also where are you racing the boat? Where the conditions suit? Are you going for big sails? Are you going for smaller sails in heavier breezy areas, etc., etc.?
Yeah. But also, certainly in the double-handed world, there's two schools of thoughts, whether you go for A sails or symmetrical spinnakers. The view is from one camp that the symmetricals can get you lower and, be a bit more versatile, whereas the A sails can be a little bit more efficient, but perhaps a little bit more limiting of where you need to get to sometimes. So it's good to have that option.
Yeah, Alistair Biggin must be psychic, because he literally gave that question as he started to. Right, thank you, Alistair. I hope that answers some of it for you. It does give you both those options, doesn't it, to go into one configuration or the other?
It does. I can see the sense in symmetrical spinnakers, but having to deal with a pole and everything for, maybe once in a while being able to just get that little bit lower on a run, whereas I think generally when you're sailing short-handed, the boat's lighter, and there's far more opportunities to just heat it up and get going, sailing slightly higher, to get a better VMG. So I don't do enough of it, but I can see that there's two very clear trains of thought.
Rightio. I'm going to move to the next slide, and here are your beautiful children, Abby and Ben and Stuart. And then, why have we got this slide up? Well, what we decided to talk about is also the new normal, and I know Stuart told me that in the situation we're at the moment, there is an opportunity, Stuart, isn't there?
There is. I think, we've all had the brakes put on us. Clearly, there's a long way to go, and there's a lot of people suffering in all sorts of contexts. However, from a sailing perspective, we're really sort of stepping into a new sport again, into the new sport, where we've got to feel our way into things. And I think those opportunities to sail with family, doing different things in a racing context is we have a great opportunity, particularly at grassroots level, and developing, that club atmosphere, and trying to do something slightly different in terms of racing, or just going out cruising and enjoying the sport, sailing around. It's a great opportunity for us.
And Fumes is obviously glued to the set. Simon Russell, don't forget the beautiful X boat in the photo. We'll let you have that one, Fumesy. No more adverts, though. You certainly don't.
Yes.
I know.
No technical clothing.
I've got to admit, we have still got the boat in the barn, and we had the boat out about 3 weeks ago, and we gave it a once over, and it's ready to go in the water. So there's a number of boats on the handball now, and there could be some sort of informal sort of orienteering around marks in company. And it's easy for myself. Luckily, Ben and Abby are both very accomplished sailors, as is Lisa, my wife, and we got a great opportunity to just go and enjoy our sailing together. And if the club sailing, as I say, if that can get going in some sort of format as well, we've got an opportunity to do a bit more together, rather than typically what's happened over the last few years is most families involved in sailing will just starburst away from the home on a Friday night and spend the whole weekend away sailing, competing, training, and doing all those sort of things, and come back late Sunday night. I think there's a chance that we're all being enforced to rethink it.
Yep. Going to stay on that sort of subject, Stuart, and this is a slide from the J70 Nationals down in beautiful Torbay, Royal
Yeah.
Torbay Yacht Club. But the point is here, regattas are going to have to change in the foreseeable future, and possibly in further than that, we might take some things on board that we actually keep. I know it's almost impossible to say what's going to happen, but I'm sure you've got a few ideas what might work for the regattas when they start to come in the UK, Stuart.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people sort of longing to get back to the days as per the picture, but I sense we're a little way off. Just the whole aspect of having 4 friends, perhaps not family members, all together on a boat seems quite hard at the moment. But if we are to get regattas going, I think using technology to the full, there's a number of things that we can do there in terms of, if you think of arriving at a club, entering a race beforehand online, doing registration online, briefings using technology to do briefings, or VHF, using the VHF far more, keeping race teams down to a minimum. So typically for a big event, you might have 6-7 people on a committee boat. Arguably, I've always said it, I'm not sure how many people look at flags, but when we're using VHF, everyone's got their back turned to us when they start. So things like let's just adopt the VHF a bit more and use the radio instead of flags to reduce the number of people on committee boats, and just look at ways of reducing that sort of clustering when people come together, and which is clearly a risk at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what comes into force. I mean, going sort of big picture, we're seeing that some schools are going to start up again in June, and they're looking at what they're doing in Denmark in terms of how they're segregating the kids and stuff like that. And we're starting to see a few regattas kicking off back in Europe now, and it's going to be interesting to see how we go about these issues we've got. And as you say, some of it might be for the good for the long time, eh?
Well, yeah, there's two aspects to it. There's the first aspect of people are rightly beginning to look towards the future and starting to plan events. At the moment, there's still a huge amount of unknowns in terms of how can we put a crew of 6, 4, 12 people together on a boat, knowing what we know now. And so working around that is going to be very, well, conceivably it's very hard right now.
Yeah.
But the good thing is, as I say, we can perhaps look at smaller numbers and of people on boats, families, get more families involved, and also look at the type of racing we're doing. We perhaps don't need big, long weekends to fulfill our needs. There's a lot of people, I'm sure right now, if there was 2 quick races in an afternoon at their local club where they could go and do that would, be really satisfying and enjoyable. Mm-hmm. Is that going to be something that clubs are going to stick to, or are we going to go back to the old of turning up early Saturday morning, fall down the water, try and do some sort of social event in the evening, same again the next day, and then arrive home after a busy weekend? I think the local clubs have got a really good opportunity to help encourage people back to the sport.
Right. And I'm going to show this slide here, and I'm going to ask Hannah to tell me who's this lot here then, Hannah?
Oh, this is the family of the J109 Giraffe, owned by Simon Perrin with his lovely family there. Which, it's really going back to basics, isn't it? Why can't we go sailing with our families and encourage, I think the common theme that we have many conversations about beyond all of this COVID-19 and everything is about getting more people out on the water and going sailing. So why not take the pause, get your family out there, and actually all of a sudden people that may not have been, that keen or that interest can actually have an opportunity to take the stresses away and just find that spark that actually all brought us to the sport in the first instance. And it, when whatever the new normal is, we can actually really embrace the sport again, have more people involved, and enjoy it fully with all our family and the people that we care about around us. It would be a pretty positive thing to come out of this, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I think that's right, Hannah. We've got plenty of time. We've got plenty of time right now to take time and bring people into the sport, and when it's not particularly busy, and encourage and get more people involved in due course.
Well, I think that's all we got time for this week. One last word from Stuart and then from Hannah, please.
Well, clearly it's a difficult time for everyone, and I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of work behind the scenes to try and get sailing back closer to how we used to sail. And I think everyone's just got to keep thinking very positively, keep looking towards the future of how we can enjoy our sport.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart, and thank you for joining us today. And it's great to talk about kind of things in the past and what we learned going forwards. And I think everybody can just take this time to actually enjoy being on the water if you're in that position to do it, or look at getting on the water if you need a means of doing it. So take the positives out of this time, and we can all go forwards in a better light, hopefully.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Stuart. And thank you for watching. Pleasure. Yeah. If you've come in halfway through, or you want to watch a replay of this, in about 10 minutes, the full replay will be up here on Key Yachting's Facebook page, and then long term, you'll be able to find it on the Key Yachting YouTube channel and also at keyyachting.com. If you've got any questions that you'd like to put to Hannah or Stuart, then please put them through to the Key Yachting email address, which is coming up now. Thanks very much for joining us, and we hope to be back next week with another show.